off the recording. Got that started. So, all right, I'll kick us off and just do an intro. Like I said, you can kind of introduce yourself and then we'll talk about your track and just kind of level set everything. Sound good?
Good, yeah.
Excellent, excellent. All right, I'll kick us off in 3, 2, 1. Hi, I'm Tom Henricksen from the DevOps Online Summit. I would like you to welcome Craig Pearson to the February edition of the DevOps Online Meetup. So this is the SRE Track discussion. Just a reminder that the DevOps Online Summit is coming April 26th through the 30th, and the call for speakers is currently out. If you go to bit.ly/DOS-CFS, you can put your talk in there and submit a talk. So Craig, why don't you introduce yourself to the people here at the DevOps Online Meetup?
So good afternoon, Tom. Great to be here. Greetings, everybody else from a cold and wintry UK. You probably tell by my accent, I'm based out of a northern part of the UK, a city called Newcastle. And I've been working across the DevOps and SRE spectrum for as long as I care to remember now. So I actually got into this whole space very much by accident. Mainly the DevOps angle. I was working with a big software company, one of the biggest players in the UK. And it was back in the day when we were shipping packaged software, putting it onto DVDs and selling it in boxes. And this business had an ambition to go online, software as a service. It was the way the industry was heading. And I was in the middle of a huge building where I had some engineers in one arm of the building. I had my IT guys in another part of the building. And in a nutshell, we had to bring those people together. Now, this was before the term DevOps was even coined. So we're going back pre-2009. And I enjoyed the challenge of getting people talking and understanding each other's world. And that's how I got into this DevOps space. Now, in recent times, because of the success of DevOps, what we've seen is a constant flow of features flowing through to users, which is great. And we are delivering the goals of DevOps. But what I'm seeing more and more of is the people who are charged with keeping services alive at scale, at, being performant, being scalable. They've been underinvested in this sort of move towards big digital services. So I started to have conversations around how we can make services more reliable. And lo and behold, there was a name for this thing called SRE. Now, a bit like DevOps, there's so many different angles to what SRE is about. I just like the fact that it gives the production services a fair seat at the table when it comes to making investment decisions. So that's how I got into SRE. So that's what I've focused on for some time. And as I was saying, it spans such a broad range of capabilities. And I'm looking forward to hosting the chair at the summit later on this year.
Yeah, excellent, Craig. Now you kind of talked a little bit about it, but why don't you, in your words, Craig, give us what you would define SRE? What was your definition?
The big focus is on reliability, and that requires so many different angles to line up. First of all, we want to make sure we are reliable and meeting the expectations of our users. There's no point in being super, super reliable if your user base just doesn't expect that. If your user base is intermittent and is working in certain hours, then there's no real need to invest hugely in reliability. But more and more organizations are operating in this 24/7 global world and need reliability. So we need to understand what our users expect of us. And a bit like with DevOps and with Agile before it, SRE has to be driven by what the business wants, because the business, your stakeholders, your sponsors are paying for this. So if you know what kind of promises you're making to your customers, then you can invest accordingly. And by invest, I mean, then you look at the areas around reliability. So look at what kind of service health do you currently have? Look at your monitoring, understand how well or otherwise your service is behaving. Are you keeping the promises you've made to your users? And if you aren't, usually you'll find it's in certain areas. It'll be scalability, it'll be in reliability. And we can look to leverage some of the great efforts in in automation to try and tackle some of that. I also see a lot of organizations who are drowning under the weight of their production services.
Yeah.
And they are at the point where they can't invest time in reliability because they're spending so much of their time just dealing with current workloads.
Mm-hmm.
And that phenomenon has a name in SRE. It's called toil. It's that effort that we all can relate to, keeping our services up, dealing with interrupts, dealing with tickets, doing manual interventions to services. These kinds of things don't scale. So we just need to tackle the root cause of that toil. And what you find is that frees up a lot of engineering time. Engineering, the E part of SRE, means we apply an engineering mindset to solving reliability problems. And that manifests itself in better products and services, by using the thing we call the wisdom of production, that understanding of the production environment, of what works, what doesn't, what the challenges are, what are the risky areas. We feed that wisdom into building better products and services. So we're applying that engineering mindset to reliability.
Yeah, that's good. You kind of remind me, I know I've or had the privilege to talk to, I should say, Dave Farley a few times. And he brings that up when I talk to him about, he's been on the summit a few years in a row. And I'm just, his ideas, I think, are so important and kind of echo what you're saying, Craig, though. But to bring us back to your track here, the SRE track on the DevOps Online Summit, tell us about what you're looking for and maybe, give us some ideas, and then we can maybe get some questions here. I know we have a few people who have joined us. So
good stuff. Yeah, so there's quite a few well-known dimensions of what SRE is about. So setting those business promises, we typically call them service level objectives. And from what I've seen thus far, everybody seems to have very, very similar service level objectives. They're very technical in nature around availability and latency. So I'd love to hear what other service level objectives people have tried and how we can bring that closer to the inspiration for SLOs, really, which is the user experience. How are we tracking the user experience, and how can we feed that into a service level objective? Obviously, innovative ways of tackling toil. There's so much toil out there, and we can get real gains in terms of time which we can reinvest in engineering better services if we can minimize toil. So any suggestions, any talks, any topics in that space would definitely be welcomed. Obviously, automation plays a key part. What I don't want to do is fall into the trap of SRE just being about automation. I saw that a lot in DevOps, and DevOps is more than that. I'm passionate about the culture change of DevOps, because that's how I got into it, the whole organizational challenge of doing DevOps. I approached it from the human angle, and likewise here with SRE. But I do know there is a massive, investment in automation in this space. So let's draw out some of the success stories. Again, what's the business benefit you've delivered through those pieces of automation? I love the fact that production is your ultimate test ground. We have this fallacy of testing where we think if we can do testing, that everything in production is going to be okay. So anything anybody's done to do production level testing or anything that helps with that production health. So looking at topics like anti-fragility, Netflix have been a pioneer in this space in terms of their chaos engineering approach, but more and more organizations aren't waiting for incidents and outages to hit them. They are introducing incidents and outages on purpose and testing how fragile their services are. So case studies, examples of anti-fragility are key. And I suppose the other one, again, coming back to the human angle, what has been the impact of SRE on individuals? So if you're out there, if you've been on a service desk, or if you've been involved in keeping production services alive, and some things came along that's made your life radically different, then let's hear about it. There's so much in SRE which has given us time, prevented burnout. When we're on call protecting these services 24/7. If your organization's done something to make your life better, then let's amplify that. The human angle, can't be overemphasized here. So I think was that 4 or 5 different topics? I'm losing count. I think there's about 5 different agenda items there, which might steer some of the discussions.
Yeah. Well, we have Stephen and VG are on here. So if you guys want to, feel free to come on, ask a question, or if you want to pop it in the chat, be happy to address your questions.
Sure. Thank you, Tom. So I'm new to this DevOps. I know the Cucumber or Loper. So those things I'm familiar, but SRE I'm not familiar. I'm trying to understand the context there.
So think more from the ops and beyond side of DevOps. If you view DevOps as a lean approach where we've got flow of changes into production, we're realizing value through, culture change, automation, lean thinking. We're getting more and more features in the hands of our users in our production environment. SRE is more focused from the right-hand side. So in that production environment, are those changes good citizens on your platform? Is your platform scalable and reliable? Are you using engineering approaches to make sure that you are delivering value at scale? That's what SRE is very much focused on. We seem to have cleared a bottleneck of delivery. That agile plus DevOps combination has allowed a lot of great stuff to flow to production, but we've now got massive services at scale, 24/7 demand. SRE is about making that world better through automation, through changes in working practices, through investing in people. So we give them time back to make services more reliable. It's an often used term, but this concept of shifting left in SRE, we want more people to understand the pain, the sensitivity, and the nuances of your production environment, because what we do by sharing that knowledge is we just end up building better services by default.
Got it. Thank you. Thank you.
No worries. It is such a new field, which is why I think it's a great topic to have at the event, because I think we've covered quite a few DevOps angles, and I think coming at it from a slightly different viewpoint will help really flush out some great stuff that will help with DevOps as well. I mean, just building on that shifting left, a lot of organizations are still protecting their production assets, their production estate, and even rebuilding the fences in the walls we've been trying to break down with DevOps. What we want to do is just use that wisdom of production and get, an understanding of what services in prod look like and how they should behave. And we get those discussions into the development teams, and we just build reliable services by default. We don't want to tag reliability on at the end. It's too late. So often that is the case. We push stuff live, and then if things go wrong, we try and fix it. We just want things to be more reliable from day one.
That's so true. Yeah, we don't want to have, like, I was reading something recently about, they were comparing how Toyota and some of the Japanese manufacturers, took that leap over a lot of the United States manufacturers, and was like you talked about, the Americans were just leaving quality to the end. They would produce as many cars as they could, and then they had all these problems. And when the Japanese started to listen to Deming and other people like that in the quality movement, that changed, kind of like what you talked about. They shifted left, and they said, well, we created, a wheel. Let's test the wheel, instead of, let's throw it all together and see if it works.
We build quality in, and SRE is about building reliability into that mix as well. Don't wait until it's too late. Let's get that in as a equal, value item into the engineering and development teams, and you'll reap the rewards. You'll make and upkeep those promises you're making to your users.
Now I see Brendan has joined us. We also have Stephen. If you guys want to ask a question, like I said, come on, you can ask a question here or throw it in the chat.
Well, I'll go next in that situation. I have a relatively new situation in front of me now. did actually work in automotive. You were just mentioning Lean and Toyota. Well, I experienced that at Honda. This is Honda of the UK manufacturing, so actually making cars. And so at Honda, we kind of split our thinking. You can imagine car manufacturing, it's full of engineering ethos already right there. But of course, in terms of the user experience, that's a very different view. Car manufacturers make cars, and everything else is subservient. So the concept of user experience hadn't really quite made it in there. I had started already looking at SRE at that particular point, and predominantly on the basis of the documentation and the examples at Google. But I haven't really had a chance to experience that. Well, as I said, now my situation is a very new one, because I'm now going into a new client who have a little bit of a tradition of service management. So there's service design there, not in the sense of engineering as you'd probably want to hear right away. So there are some gaps there. But actually, the big thing for them, and this is why the whole thing is a little bit upside down, and I should probably not come to a summit, but rather go to a clinic on SRE. What's now happening is that it's essentially their product range is turning from a cyclical range, which actually was relatively easy to manage in a waterfall methodology, and to a large extent they have managed the development in-house, but have also fallen back on other suppliers. Well, all of that is being changed radically, and they now have to move towards an agile model, simply because the cyclical delivery isn't going to work any longer. It's not really going to be continuous for at least another 2 years, but it's going to be sort of shorter frequencies, so that they're actually approaching agile on the product side to an extent. But what they absolutely must approach is agile on the development side. And so the question is very simply, from their perspective, as they don't have an engineering mindset, they haven't ever needed to do that. In fact, they barely had a service concept behind this. It was a kind of productization concept, really, quite an old-fashioned one in that sense, because that's the industry that they work in. So now the question is, we have to make this huge big leap from going to from starting out cyclically and working our way in less than 2 years to agile product delivery. And we're going to get some help with that from some really big names, but then of course I've got to discuss that then as well. Is the methodology actually going to be fit for my client or for our shared client? But also at the same time, we focus much more, because of being in the agile world, on the aspects that you're talking about, predominantly reliability, but also both user experience and customer experience. And these are actually, on this occasion, very different terms. The customer experience is prescribed in service levels, in service contracts, in particular expectations, because it's financial services industry, so relatively high expectations in terms of service. But also the whole dynamic of reliability and availability changes dramatically, because no longer is there the fallback of, well, if it doesn't happen today, then it happens tomorrow. Just come back and take your service, because tomorrow, in future, the numbers are going to be completely different. So tomorrow it's a different service that people are taking. So these things come into that. And because I've not really experienced this live, I'm wondering, do I have to say to this client, we need to build in these aspects of reliability right from the start? We won't have another opportunity in, say, 12 months, 18 months to go back and say, oh, well, now we need these aspects, and now we need to go back to the drawing board and revise our engineering approach. Or from your experience, do you think with these types of services, there is also an opportunity to say, well, get on with your product design and designing your services and getting your product development approach tuned into a DevOps, into continuous integration, at least to begin with, and over time, approach a situation, and that's going to get you ready. And then we start talking about site reliability. So that's a very long-winded way of putting a very simple question. Is reliability something we need to start right away with as far as DevOps is concerned, or
Well,
is it for another day?
Come back on that. Obviously, what we want is a reliable service. So we can all relate to things that have got a very grand launch, and were problematic from day one. I mean, the example I come back to a lot is Pokemon Go, which a lot of the kids went crazy for. Okay, it was a great product built and released in very tight time scales, but just was unreliable, didn't scale. They hadn't considered any of that as part of their product development plan. You need to bring in an element of reliability. Now, it's hard because you just don't know how big your new product is going to be, how successful it's going to be. But in some of the automation capabilities we have at our disposal now, and some of the platforms we can use, we can at least start by saying, you know what, we're going to make this auto scaling. We don't know how much scaling we're going to need, but we're going to make it auto scaling by default. We won't try and tag scaling on at the end. If it's critical to your business and the success of your business, then by default, I assume you want it to scale, you want it to be successful. So factor in elements of things like auto scaling from the start. Get things into production quicker. And this is a common challenge I have as an agile DevOps coach, as well as working in SRE, is I see so many products which are built and do great demos, but don't make it into live. I keep hearing things like, well, we need a hardening sprint before we can go into production. No, what we want to do is get into production as quick as we can. It might be a silent launch, it might be a hidden launch, doesn't matter. What you start to then pick up on is that wisdom of production. You know how your product or service performs in your real environment. You can do as much testing as you want, but it's in prod where it matters. And you start to build that knowledge in your team to the point where the team themselves self-organize and say, you know what, I know these features are great, but we need to do something with our platform, or we need to re-architect. And it's easier to re-architect in the early days than it is trying to re-architect later. And I think one of the agile principles is very much on that. The best solutions come from self-organizing teams, because they spot quickly, you know what, this isn't going to scale in production. I'd rather detect that in sprint 1, 2, and 3 than 20 and 30 when it's too late. It's not too late. It's just much more expensive to do. So that blend of agile approach for speed of delivery, tightening the deployment cycle through DevOps approaches, but then using the wisdom of production to build better, scalable, and reliable services is quite a strong triumvirate. And I definitely advocate at least having that expertise in the mix as soon as you can. Day one, ideally.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very good answer. That's very helpful.
Yeah, no problem. It's something I hear a lot, because usually people turn to SRE when they've had reliability problems. And that's not what Google intended. I mean, Google coined the term a good few years ago now, and they realized the size of their business, the way it was growing, they had to use engineering approaches. And they stumbled upon the sort of site reliability engineering term. And a lot of people look at SRE on the back of major incidents and outages. And actually you shouldn't. You should be trying to prioritize reliability, scalability, and all of those other things that make our services grow healthily as early as you can. It's not something you should tag on at the end. It's something you want to build into the DNA of your products. And to be fair, more and more of the world in which we operate is going online. More and more businesses are becoming software-led. Their digital capability is going to make or break their business and their market. So financial services, I think you mentioned, you'd probably want to go with a reliable bank, than an unreliable bank. If your banking app is available 24/7, or at least when you use it as a user, that's great. An app that doesn't work when you need to make a critical payment ain't going to be around for too much longer, is it? So
No, that's absolutely, and that's where my thinking also came in, because at one point I did work for Visa in Europe at a point shortly after they'd split, and that was absolutely the mantra, that nobody comes to an automatic teller and doesn't get their money out, because that gets Visa out of business. Visa is out of business within weeks if that happens. And I have actually brought, this is probably a very old-fashioned term now, but I brought the concept of operational integrity into it already, which is, you know, it's a bit of a banking term, but it also provides for those hooks into the service definition and the service level objectives, as you said. Don't build them only around the business expectations, but they must be measurable in terms of reliability and availability. For the operational management, it will be a very straightforward jump to then say, well, if we want to measure that properly, of course, we're going to have to do it in production. At least we're going to have to have tests early on in the game plan. To show us where production is going to go with it.
That sort of, I suppose, takes me on to another track, Tom, which I've been thinking about. And a popular term in this world is observability. And that has, again, a lot of connotations to it. Now, it would be great to find out through this summit where people have got to with that concept of observability, because I see the future where services are observable, and we use artificial intelligence and machine learning to help us understand what a healthy service looks like, and we can then react to that in terms of potential performance degradation and outages and issues. I just see most observability solutions at the moment are still very much the reactive, the built on monitoring. We're extending monitoring capabilities to do some automated healing and automated scaling, but that isn't quite hitting the observability sweet spot at the moment. So if anybody's got some great examples of where they have made their service observable, and I think there's a lot of parts that go into that, you know, it's an amalgamation of a lot of pre-existing capabilities, but that ability to infer what you mean by a healthy service, an operational service, and then be able to react to that is a strong one. And I suppose when we were talking there as well about the history of SRE, it also got me thinking of another area, because some of the terms in these frameworks, you know, like Scrum, for example, that concept of a Scrum Master, that came when we used to have webmasters, you know, when we were first getting going with the web. Likewise, sites, you know, that's a website, you know, site reliability, website reliability. Well, SRE is across organizations. It can be all kinds of components. So I know of the existence of network reliability, of database reliability, of customer reliability, you know, different areas where the whole SRE ethos has been applied in new domains. So again, that might be another potential, you know, source of topics. Where have you applied that SRE principles and practices, but in a new and innovative area? And one area I tried with the client was in the legacy space, you know, legacy services, heritage services, I think was the term that was being used. You can apply some of this focus on SLOs and error budgets, even to some legacy COBOL kind of applications, you know. So any examples where people have applied SRE in new areas would definitely be worth hearing about.
Yeah. Well, I know we're kind of near our time box here, Craig. I just want to, you know, take a minute to thank you for sharing your time here today and answering some questions. So we really appreciate that.
Not a problem, Tom. Being good to be a part of this, and I look forward to seeing some stuff coming through so we can make a good track at the event itself.
Exactly. Well, I want to thank everyone else too who joined us here today on the DevOps Online Meetup. Appreciate your time. Definitely submit a talk, and hopefully we'll see you on Craig's track here in a few months. So thank you, everyone, and have a great day.
Thank you. Appreciate you for your inputs. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much, both.
Thank you.
Thank you all.